Hi, good evening, everyone, and good afternoon and good morning from wherever you guys have joined us. It's really nice that you're part of the Green Growth series with us. I'm Nidhi Batra. I'm from an organization called Sahriti, which is a platform for collective practices, which works on integrated sustainable development. And today, with my colleague Pratima from the Urban Vision and the Eco Enterprise School, we've come together in co-creating this something what we call as Green Growth Series. Now, the Green Growth Series is a platform where we want to showcase stories of change makers, solutions, best practices, businesses which have an agenda of sustainable and green economy. We want to understand green growth. We want to understand green jobs. We want to understand green businesses. The idea is to understand, where and how these businesses have environment protection in their agenda. They're talking about inclusive development, and at the same time they are not forgetting the economic development and progress. So I'll begin with that, and this is second in our series. The first in our series was the Black Baza Coffee, and we really enjoyed that, and thank you for joining in that one also. And I'll hand over to my colleague Pratima now, who will take us through with this further.
Thank you, Nidhi. Welcome, everyone. It's so nice to be back to talk about green development and sustainable development again. This pandemic has really tested our societies, and beyond the immediate priority of everyone's health, well being, and livelihoods, this crisis is actually an opportunity to reimagine our communities to be more ecologically friendly, green, fair, inclusive, and resilient. And in this series, we are profiling thought leaders and ideas for sustainable development. And today, we are so thrilled to have Dr. Vivek Tandon with us to talk to us about green growth. And he's an entrepreneur who's led various ventures in that agenda of green and sustainable development. Thank you, Vivek, for joining us. And just to give you a little background about him, he's the founder of Aloe Private Equity, which has for many years supported and funded capital investments into companies with environmentally sustainable technologies. And they have focused on China, India, and Southeast Asian countries. Um, He's currently the chairman of Perpetual Group, which we are really excited to talk to him about because it's such a crucial part of this green agenda. It's a revolutionary bottle recycling company. He's also part of the Greenko Group, which is an Indian listed renewable energy company. And he kind of has a varied experience in this whole big agenda of green growth. Vivek, thank you for joining us today. And how have you been over the last this year, which has been a very strange year? Feels like it's out of this dystopian movie or
It
something.
is. Well, you guys have done a good job. It's great that you're putting the series together. And I like the way you're using all your time locked away to do something innovative and different again. So
Yeah.
hats off to you.
Yeah,
That's very impressive.
yeah, this is our quarantine experiment, which has been fun. So I want to start this conversation with you by asking you what does green growth mean to you, and why is it so important? Because you spent a large part of your career pursuing that agenda, Vivek.
It's quite embarrassing because when you send me the question, that term green growth has been used, but I was like, it's a very good question. What actually is green growth? It didn't actually, come to me so quickly. But yeah, I suppose when you talk about green growth with people, the general trend is to talk about it as a use of your natural resources in a sustainable manner, and how to use it better than what I would call traditional businesses have done. So when you look at traditional businesses, I would say that over the last 50 to 100 years, really the focus has always been predominantly on making profit. And inevitably, I suppose, profit has always come through the exploitation of certain assets or certain aspects in order to make the profit. So, for example, you'd exploit the land, or you'd use the land, you'd use up all its minerals and all its fertilizers, and then you'd move on to the next land. And and use up that. Or you would make profit at the expense of the environment. You put pollution, water. You wouldn't clean it up properly. You would disperse air pollution. If you did any of those things properly, it would probably affect your profits and you would make less. And then, of course, the other one that everybody exploits or has been traditionally exploitative of is the workforce. So you squeeze the salaries of the workforce in order to squeeze and make higher profits. And I think the word green growth for me is more than just natural resources, sustainable manner. It's really focused on becoming far more holistic as a business. It's not just about making better uses of your resources, but it's also about working in harmony with the people around the manufacturing plants, the people on a global scale, trying to make sure you put stuff back into both the economy and your surroundings, rather than just exploiting. And I think hopefully more and more businesses are coming up with this idea.
That's great. So we just wanted to
a do-gooder, but it does work.
No, seriously. And it's not. Everybody is talking about green growth, but like you said, it's challenging for everyone, right? So we wanted to understand from you, based on your present enterprise, which is Perpetual. What made you get into this? So why did you think that there is a need, of course, to address the larger plastic issues? And apparently, there are like 600 million bottles that come up in the world that we waste every year. And I understand from the research that we've done that you've already recycled 2 billion of those. So can you run us through about what Perpetual's model is and what you really do in it? What is the technology and why did you get into this? So what was the urge for you to step into this venture?
The background really came quite some time ago, actually, really as far long ago as I would have to think, what are we now, in 2020. So it really goes back to about 1998, 2000, so at the turn of the century. We worked together as a team in Aloe Private Equity, and we came up with the concept that we liked, which was called mines above ground. And mines above ground was a philosophy where we were starting to look at all the products that people had used, and rather than calling it waste, we would call it, or we try to think about it more as a new supply or a new feedstock to be used to create something of equal or better value to virgin material. So Mines Above Ground kick-started a program where we started looking around the world for valuable, and again, I hate this word waste, but I'll use it once and then try not to use it again. Valuable waste or products that people had used once and then did not want to use again, and trying to figure out how we could convert that waste back into a product that had equal or higher value to the conventional material. And I think that was quite a different change in concept, because in those days, everybody used to talk about recycling. Whereas when we looked back in the early turn of this century, recycling was really more focused on what we call today more downcycling, i.e. it was taking waste and converting it back into, sorry, my phone's going off here, so I'm just going to fix this up. So it was more converting waste back into a product that could be used, but the product that was used was normally inferior in quality to the conventional material. And our focus was really focusing on finding a way to convert waste back into a product that had equal or higher value. From that, we then learned that we really needed to really focus on technology development and go back to basics. And we started to look at 4 or 5 key areas. So one of the key areas, for example, was tire recycling. I've been looking for technology to recycle tires for a long time. And to be honest, I still haven't found a really good technology that can take a tire and convert that tire back into another tire. You can take tires today, but downcycle it. There were other technologies that we looked at, for example, battery recycling. So the ability to take a lithium-ion battery and convert it back into another virgin lithium-ion battery. And this then kicked off Perpetual. So the answer to your question is that's where Perpetual came from. We then started to look at plastic as a problem in the world, and as a growing problem. And we wanted to find a solution of how we could take a plastic and convert it back into a product which, again, could be used again and again and again. And that kick-started Perpetual Globe.
Awesome. So could you tell us a bit more about what Perpetual does? So we do know that it converts bottles into sustainable yarn. So maybe just a little bit of the technology and a little bit of the process would be helpful.
Yeah, so actually, plastic is demonized, in my opinion. I've got maybe a bit of an agenda here, but actually, even before we had the technology. So even before we had the technology to be able to convert plastic has been a really, first of all, I don't think people maybe realize that the initial patents around PET only came about really as early as 1941, 1942s. And the first plastic PET bottle was really only made somewhere in the region of 1972-73 period. So, it's not that old a technology and product out there. And it is a beautiful technology, i.e., you are creating a material that is extremely pure. So for those who don't know where plastic comes from, you start with oil and gas, and then you go through various distillation processes. Actually, I have a diagram somewhere. Let's see if this one will work. Let's see if you guys can see that on the computer.
Yeah.
There's my camera here. Right.
Pop
my head above and lift that up.
Yes.
So there you go.
That's
So
good.
you start from, now we're going to have to get this. So you start from oil and gas. And as you go through a distillation process, you get two chemicals. You get something that's called glycol, or the full name is monoethylene glycol. And then you get this other material here that's called PTA MEG, so polythyric acid. And if you mix your PTA and MEG, you essentially get what you have in that green box, which is called your ester. Okay. And ester can be considered like your base building Lego block, from which you can make anything polyethylene based or PET based effectively. So polyethylene terephthalate. And what people don't realize is that your plastic bottle is made from ester. Your cling film, or the Americans call it BOPET, is made from ester. And your polyester clothing, so what I'm currently wearing here, for example, is polyester shirt, that is also made from the same ester product.
Right.
And I suppose it was that conceptualization that a lot of companies actually had already taken plastic and found a way to convert the plastic all the way back into oil. So the ability to convert plastic back into oil has been around for quite some time. And that's not a new thing. People have been doing that, and the technology exists for that. The problem that you had is when you converted your plastic all the way back to oil, the cost of then converting that oil back into plastic again was prohibitively expensive.
Right.
And you can imagine that, because you either start from oil and gas and you go straight to plastic, or you start from plastic all the way back to oil and gas and then back to plastic.
Yeah, that's a long chain. Yeah.
Costs were just too high. So the technology was there, but the economics were not. What really was groundbreaking for Perpetual was there was a developer by the name of Simon West, who was based in Australia. And Simon West was a very good entrepreneur and a chemist by background, and developed a number of technologies. And one of the technologies he developed was the ability to take a plastic, PET plastic, and reverse the PET plastic just to an ester rather than all the way back to oil.
Okay.
And so what we do, so let's maybe should I show you some demonstrations and some pictures?
Yes,
So what's pretty nice is you take a piece of plastic, you cut your plastic up into something like that, which is called a flake, which I think a lot of it's just a standard piece of plastic. And again, a lot of people have done this again. So they've taken a piece of plastic like this, and again, for the last 15 to 20 years, particularly, for example, in India, they can convert that plastic into something that is called staple fiber. So staple fiber looks a little bit like cotton. It's very short strands of effectively polyester. And staple fiber is traditionally used for example, stuffings. So it's like stuffings for your cushions or stuffing maybe even on this back of this chair, or teddy bears or anything like that. So that's traditionally where it was used. It has, however, also been used a lot to make fleeces. So companies like Patagonia used it. So the ability to convert a plastic bottle back into clothing has been around for probably close to 15 to 20 years. The problem is this polyester, again, that is made in this mechanical method is typically lower quality material than the stuff that you'd need to make, a shirt or a high quality product. So what Perpetual figured out doing is a way of actually taking the PET plastic here, and by just adding glycol, or effectively the MEG that we talked about before, and adding that glycol in a certain process and in a certain manner, we could convert that flake into essentially what is known as an ester.
Oh.
So this is an ester.
Okay.
So an ester looks just like a white powder, actually. Looks no different to talcum powder. It's a bit rougher here, or a highly illicit drug, but we won't go down that route. So, so this is ester, and this ester that is produced here, that I show you, is no different to the ester you'd get from a conventional, traditional manufacturer who started from oil and gas.
So now you can convert it into anything you want.
Wow.
Right. So once you have this, then you've got your building block to either, as you correctly said, make it back into a plastic bottle, or make it into cling film or BOPET film, or anything that uses PET. We chose to convert it into textiles. So we make it into actually this yarn, and that's essentially the yarn we make it from. So this bobbin of yarn is no different to any other bobbin of yarn that is out there in the world, other than it started its life as a plastic bottle, as opposed to starting from oil. And that's just beautiful, right? And that's really nice. So, and then you can, you make products out of it. So this is I don't know if I'm allowed to show brands on your thing, but since this is an informal chat, that's a beautiful Adidas top, made from 100% plastic bottles. You can make shirts like I'm wearing on this shirt. So you can make anything polyester based out of that, really. And it's just really nice, isn't it? It's lovely. So
that's such a nice, hopeful story for our times. And I feel, thank you for that chemistry lesson. And, I think we need to make a little clip of.
Going to get a lot of people complaining that it was half accurate, half inaccurate.
No, but I think it's nice to, see the big demon of environmental crisis, which is plastic broken down for all of us. I didn't know so much about it. And plastic has been the kind of the big bad boy for environmental crisis. And we've all seen those islands of plastics in our oceans and how our food chains are being polluted by plastic. So this is what you're doing is revolutionary. And if we could, this whole approach and recognition that the challenges that's caused by our current kind of take, make, dispose, one-time use plastic is really hurting the economy. And if we could create more innovations like this, we could solve that crisis, And I want to talk to you about the bigger kind of philosophical idea of the circular economy, which does this. It eliminates waste and repurposes waste into an economic opportunity. And I just read before talking to you, that's a $4.5 trillion economy in the next decade or so. And you probably know that better than me.
We're a tiny part then. We've got opportunity to grow. Good.
But it's so nice to see businesses doing this and pushing the circular economic model, because that's what we need to solve this bigger crisis. So tell us what are the major barriers encountered to develop businesses like this, and how can they be tackled?
Actually, again, I think things are quite straightforward if people make it too complicated. If you make things, problems to solve actually are not so complicated. So the first thing you said earlier on was, one-time use. And that is the problem. So people sort of jump on the bandwagon and demonize plastic, whereas really what they should be doing is doing more what you said. It's demonizing the use of anything once, right? And here the word waste is used correctly, i.e., one should not waste anything, whether it be, and I think David Attenborough said it the other day on TV as well, whether you're talking about wasting one more minute of electricity or you're wasting your food, waste is a word that should be used in that context. Where waste should not be used in the context is once you have used something and no longer wish to use it further. At that stage, once you've used something and no longer wish to use it further, it shouldn't be considered waste. It should then be considered feedstock for further processing, or feedstock to be used again. And then you need, in my opinion, two very simple, basic approaches to it. The first approach to it has to be to develop technology, because again, traditionally, technology has always been to develop to further exploitation of natural resources, and rather than to use the technology to, I don't know if the word is to renovate, but to recycle products again and again and again and to reuse them. So for example, again, in Perpetual, it has taken more than 15 years to get this technology fully developed, fully commercialized, and to a level where it makes good profit. It's able to expand. The business works well. It's able to take care of the staff, the team, the environment, and all the rest of the important aspects of green growth. So that's the first thing, is technology. The second thing is actually comes back to, you do have to make it exciting from a monetary perspective for people. So what do I mean by that? People talk about plastic bottles. So I think Nidhi mentioned earlier on correctly, the word today is that there's approximately 660 billion bottles used every single year, which is incredibly mind-boggling, right? Considering that we're only processing a day about 3 million bottles a day. And as you said, we've just passed our 2 billionth plastic bottle mark. But that's since the last, but that's tiny, right? That's since we started the company. When you think 660 billion bottles every single year need to be processed, the concept is just horrifying. So how do you do this? Again, the focus has to be to make the plastic bottles almost too expensive to throw away. So I like in my head to think of this theory of, we make a bobbin of yarn. The bobbin of yarn that we make goes into a product like this. Just to put it clearly, this product here would sell for maybe about $29 US. Okay. So this product will sell for $29 US. Most of that, as people will know, is the branding. Right. So marketing the brand. The actual amount of polyester that goes into this material is less than about 30 US cents.
Wow.
Yeah. So, it's a very good concept for people to understand. 30 US cents of actual material goes in here in terms of the resource, and creates a product which is worth $30 US. So what we need to do slowly is to move the market. And this is what Perpetual is trying to do also. We've been trying to do this for the last few years. So today, for example, we are willing to buy a ton of used plastic bottles. So for example, in India, we would be prepared to pay up to, let's say, $400 US for a ton of plastic, which means then when you look at the beaches in India and you see all the plastic on the beach there, it suddenly changes the mindset and concept from, oh my God, it's a beach full of rubbish and waste, to it's a beach that in the next 200 meters, if I was to clear it up, I would get probably $150 US.
Wow.
if there was somebody to take that waste or those plastic from me. And there is now. So there is this green growth economy, which I think is going to develop more and more over the next 20, 30, 40 years, where people are increasingly going to be looking at applying technology and being willing to buy, again, not waste, but products that are thrown away or discarded and using that as feedstock. And finding a way actually that the feedstock that comes from waste is actually potentially cheaper than getting the feedstock from the natural resource. And I can give another example of that later on if you're interested in another company that I also have.
But that's such a great story, that the plastic bottle that we use, which is such a horrible sight in our beaches and public spaces, could potentially be transformed into that Zara dress that we're buying, or like the Adidas shoes or t-shirt. That's amazing.
Zara is one of our customers, so yeah, I actually do have some Zara products upstairs, probably somewhere.
Is there? Are brands looking to buy your products just to increase their sustainability footprint, or is it just business because you're giving them their raw material at the same cost and good quality? What do you think it is?
Yeah, so okay, you mentioned a really good point there actually, which didn't come out before. So you mentioned quality, and I think this is the key thing to hit on the head. Because you make an ester, and essentially, what is perpetual? Perpetual is not actually, although when you come to our manufacturing plant, what you see going into the plant is plastic bottles and then this coming out. So one can get the concept and the feeling that Perpetual is a textile company. Well, we're not actually. What we really are is we're a chemical company that produces the world's first sustainable ester, right? And then, as you correctly said, from this ester, you can make anything you want. So when you come to quality, what needs to be understood is that you're starting with the same chemical material that any of the traditional players would start with. There's no difference to this chemical material to anybody else. So the quality that you produce is the same. And the equipment that you use to convert this into this is exactly the same as the equipment that you'd use from a traditional oil and gas industry. So there's no difference. So this is really important because over the last 20 years, the word recycling, I would say, has been almost, excuse the pun, but recycling is a dirty word in the sense that it's not sexy. The traditional feeling by most people is when you buy something recycled, its quality is inferior. Whereas actually now, there's a lot of recycled material out there where the quality is the same. In fact, if you want to say it, in fact, the quality is even better. It's better because it's the same quality as in the traditional word of quality, but it's better in the sense that it uses less water, less energy, less CO2 emissions, and you save the environment. I don't know if that's one part of your question that you asked, which I jumped into. You asked something else which I diverted from, but you can ask it.
No, but this is good because it is leading on to what we wanted to ask you next also. So this is good.
Okay. So Pratima, you asked something else as well. I don't think.
No, I got the answer. You're creating good quality raw material for the best brands in the world like Zara and Adidas to use, and we love that because the next time I buy like that extra pair of shirt, I feel better because it's from
No, you should. And so yeah, your questions about the brands, and actually the brands have been wonderful because again, I don't want to choose one brand above another brand, but people like Decathlon, Adidas, these H&M, these kind of guys have really come out there and helped with the marketing. They've helped to get it to the consumers. There's still a lot more work that needs to be done. I do believe the general consumer public is not aware that the quality of the product is exactly the same and the price is exactly the same. So when you go to the shop, down the street, you have a choice. You can go to the rack and buy one made from 100% sustainable material, or buy one from traditional, and the quality is the same and the price is the same.
Is there information that says that? So when I go to my Adidas store, does it say this is recycled based on recycled?
Yeah, so you're right. It should. So again, so the answer to your question is yes, there is. It appears in different ways. So it either appears in like very, very tiny tags on the inside of the clothing. Strangely enough, I don't know where this tag has gone. I might have cut it off sometime. But normally you have a tag here, and it says on there 100% recycled polyester. Or it comes on stuff like this, which is normally on the garments. So you will see something that will say, made from 100% plastic bottles. And some of the people who use ours, will have this tag on it. There are other companies who also do it. So, keep an eye open. This is not the only tag out there. There's many companies that can produce good, high quality polyester as well for recycled material. So, there is this opportunity. And by the way, just to let you know, today, we can also take 100% polyester t-shirt, put that back into our process and produce an ester from it, and then convert it into a bottle. So it's still at infancy stage, and it's still very much a prototype and trial stage, but we're already there.
No, but
so the technology already exists today.
Yeah. So you can collect all that back.
Absolutely.
That's the real circular economy then.
And maybe we can come in with new business models in the future, right? Yeah. Maybe the new business models in the future is you rent this t-shirt from me. So you rent it from me for $30 and then when you're finished with it, at the end of it, you send it back to me. Or maybe it's a football t-shirt. So you have a football t-shirt with the football club, and then the football team changes, and you say you don't want to support Liverpool, you want to support a different team. So you send it back to us, and then we recycle it back into the new.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of brands are trying those with their packaging and things to recycle, but I think it hasn't really happened in plastic per se. But I think that would be a very interesting model to do. And so we wanted to get a little bit deeper into, and you mentioned some of this, like you mentioned what green growth means to you, not just in terms of technology or considering it not as a waste, but as a valuable product, but also in terms of jobs, in terms of the larger sustainability. And like Pratima mentioned before, you've also been part of a lot of these green funds in an era where green funds were not even known. So, back in like early 2000s, where this term of green economy and green funding was not even being discussed at the level it is thankfully being discussed now. So keeping those two things in mind, Vivek, how do you define your own impacts for Perpetual, and how do you measure it? And you also spoke about the quality, you spoke about many other aspects, and you're in very interesting economic modeling that it really needs to be more expensive so that people don't waste these products. So do you have your own impact metrics, which talks about environmental and social at the same time? And would you run through it for us?
Yeah, so everything that we've done, actually it's kind of almost fortuitous.
You just lost
me. We started. No, you've lost me?
Now we have.
We can hear you.
We have you.
Clearly a sign I've been talking too much and should talk less. I think since the day we started Perpetual, actually, almost lucky for us was we were always, I've personally always been focused on environment and sustainability. So the concept that we wanted to create and the technology we wanted to create in order to be able to convert a plastic bottle back into an ester, from day one, we looked at that being an environmental process. And that's actually really helped us. Because we focused on it being environmental and being sustainable, it meant from day one, we never used any toxic chemicals or toxic materials. And that inevitably led us to just using glycol. And glycol then is inevitable, is already in PTMEG, as I discussed earlier on. So it meant that our process costs were automatically quite low. It also meant, just by chance as well, that we then didn't have so much waste. So there's very, very little wastage in the plant. It also means that we use approximately, I think, I'm just trying to check it because I sometimes get it wrong. Yeah, we use about 75% less energy than a conventional processing plant. And we use about 82% less water than a conventional plant. So again, just by nature of wanting to do the right thing and wanting to operate correctly, we were then, Karma had a good way of paying us back by making sure that our process was, very cheap. So actually, I haven't said this very much out there, but we might as well say it in this this thing, so we normally keep this quite quiet, but we can today make this ester cheaper than if you make it from oil and gas.
Wow.
So, yeah. So, you're now not just competing with the oil and gas companies on quality. We've already equaled their quality, if not bettered it. We're bettering them also now on environmental aspects, but more importantly, we're now also beating them on price. And for me, that is the big, big game changer, because you then have to ask people and the big brands, why wouldn't you replace our ester with other people's ester? And why wouldn't you use a more environmentally friendly ester if it's the same price, same quality than traditional ester? And that's, I think, where the way the industry is going to move going forward. Or at least I hope it is.
Yeah. No, I mean, and that's going to make the difference, because they will understand the economics of it, right? It's not just the environment footprint, but the economics of it. So that's quite brilliant, actually. And I hope this all is patented technology where you're keeping it close.
It is patented, but actually, that's, to be honest with you, that's not, there are a lot of companies also developing technologies. Mm-hmm. And I'm very keen for all companies to develop it. I'm very keen for people to use our technology if they can. Very happy to help people, because what you need to understand is, again, the competition is not, I am not competing against other people who want to recycle bottles. I want them to be just as successful. I am competing against the oil companies. That's my competition. So just to put that into some sort of metrics, the amount of polyester that is produced a year is 52 million tons a year just for the textile industry. Okay, I am producing approximately 10,000 tons a year right now. So we need, and from the other metrics that you use, Nidhi, there's 660 billion bottles a year discarded, and we're barely processing, 2.5 million a day. So some 100 million a year. So the demand is there, the supply is there. This is the wonderful thing about green growth businesses, right? The wonderful thing about green growth businesses is you've got the supply. It's supply of feedstock that people don't want, that you're able to get relatively cheaply and in bountiful supply. You don't have to fight anybody for it. It's not like you're going to dig up the Amazon rainforest to take out another ton of copper or something. It's sitting there. It's already processed. Yeah, it's already processed as well, which, oil, people talk about oil as being black gold. And I'm always saying, no, guys, oil's not black gold. Oil is disgusting, dirty, polluted stuff that you take out of the ground, and you spend, billions of processing dollars to clean it. And then you clean it into this great plastic, which is clean and lovely, and then you call it waste. I mean, it's just conceptually, it just doesn't work. So I think, coming back to your point there again, Nidhi, it's the other way around, right? The recycling community and this green growth economy, we don't have to compete with one another. And we need to learn this. We've had a tradition of competing for the last 50, 60 years. In green growth, our competition is very different. It is not one another. We should be supportive of one another. We should help one another to expand. The market opportunity is huge. It's too big for any one or even a dozen companies to take.
You're going to take capitalism's case here.
Yeah, I think, it's kind of reimagining capitalism in a way, right? You're kind of decoupling economic growth from environmental degradation. So the view was that any growth leads to environmental degradation. So if we look at patterns of sustainable consumption and production like your company, you're doing more and better with less. And you're kind of actually kind of creating a circular system. And I think that's amazing. But I want to highlight what you just said, Vivek. I dug up another stat for you. Apparently, only 8.6% of the world is circular. So we need more of you. And, this should become the norm, really. And I think I want to quickly take a audience question and comment at this time. Hi, Camilla. Camilla is from Tampa. And she's asking us, do you have any insights on sustainable materials for construction and urban infrastructure, that is roads and sewage? And I know, recycled plastic has been, used in roads as well. So any thoughts and
Okay, more,
insights?
you're the expert in construction and urban development.
Yes.
Fatima. This is a question that you should definitely address, and I'm sure you must have a way better answer. You want
But
to
you
answer it, or
guys,
you want me to?
no, but we do. We've seen recycled plastic going into road construction and even building construction as a component of concrete and cement, for example. So do you? I'm
But
not an
there's mixed
expert on the
opinions
technical.
also about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, if we go back to the start of this interview, so first of all, thank you very much for the question, Kymata. I appreciate that, and for watching this live. Again, for me, recycling is taking a product that somebody doesn't want and creating a product that's equal or higher value.
Right.
So sounds ungrateful is maybe the word, but when you take plastic, or when people do take plastic and they put it into roads, I cry, because for me that's again downcycling, right? That's taking a product that has such good, wonderful, high value and creating something where really what you're trying to do, frankly speaking, is you're trying to put it somewhere that nobody can see it and using it. However, having said all of that, I would say, that's still better than the plastic going into the ocean. It's still better than the plastic being thrown away. So it is a stopgap. So, we have this, until technology can develop, until you have enough companies that can process it, you do need to do very much what Kymata says, which is at least use it as a downcycled product. And so I think specifically her question was, do you have any insight into sustainable materials for construction and urban infrastructure and i.e. roads and sewage? And yes, there is a lot of use of many, to be honest, many products that have been used that are then recycled back into a high quality material. So for example, it's not just in plastics, but it's also in, I'll give you a good example that I know. One of the other companies that I sit on the board of is a waste electronic recycler, and it recycles about, approximately 10,000 washing machines a week, and probably about 10,000 TVs a week. And that's a very good example where, you produce very high quality steel. So instead of having a new steel processing plant, you can get very good, very high quality steel, very good high quality copper, metals, all sorts, from just, again, a mine above ground, right? It's a product that's there, that has already had all the traditional industries cleaning up and making it a good product, and you're able to reuse it as a very high quality conventional like material again.
I love the term mine above the ground. And I kind of truly understood it after this 30-minute conversation with you. I mean, instead of just kind of being a leech on our natural resources, it'd be nice to kind of just repurpose our own, used products to create more consumer products and uses of it. That's amazing. I wanted to ask you, I want to point back to that stat that I referred to, which is only 8.6% of the world is circular. And your data points also suggest to a number which is, which probably is in single digits, right? In terms of the whole, the way the economic system works at this point in time. Are you as a company or, as kind of an evangelist for green growth for many years, have you worked on communication or awareness building programs for consumers to kind of embrace this? Not just in terms of their own sustainable consumer behavior and being responsible about how we use things, but creating demand. So so brands just, brands like Zara use only 100% recycled material, for example. Are there campaigns or, awareness building programming that you've had to move, and to kind of leapfrog into this new green economy?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question, Pratima, actually. And I suppose there's a lot of lessons learned that we've had over the years. So we specifically took a decision to make Perpetual a B2B business more than a B2C business. And so we have spent, so actually just to go backwards, we've had this technology, i.e. the technology to be able to convert a flake or a plastic, use plastic into a textile. We've had this technology since about 2010. And I would have to say in the early days, it was a tremendous challenge to convince the brands to replace conventional yarn with sustainable yarn. And most of our, to use your word, campaigning was really trying to get them to make that shift and to make that change. Mm-hmm. And it's the partnership between the brands and ourselves that has allowed us, I would say, in the last 3-4 years to become more prevalent and to have, a higher quality product, because we needed a lot of support of the brands as well to help us through that transition phase. And some of them like Adidas and Decathlon were really helpful with us in supporting us through difficult periods to make those transitions. So the consumer behavior side, we've done more by allowing the brands to help to change that consumer side, because they have so much more budget than us. Mm-hmm. Their marketing budgets would swamp anything that I could ever dream of doing. That is their strength, and that is also where they can then differentiate themselves from their other brands. So yes, I would say the brands themselves do a lot of consumer advertising about recycled. I would say it's increasing. There has definitely been, like any period of shift, quite a lot of greenwashing as well. So, trying to just be different for the sake of being different rather than believing it. But there are also those brands who really hold it to heart. Again, I mentioned Decathlon, who really, it's very ingrained into their organization. It's ingrained into the philosophy of the family and the group behind it and the shareholders. And, they really genuinely believe it and want to make a change. And frankly speaking, so for example, they don't advertise it so much. They don't make a big song and dance out of it, but they are really aggressively trying to move to a scenario where 100% of their products are trying to use sustainable material by, as early as even 2025, 2026. So I think it's happening. It's happening very quickly. As for the consumer, I do think the millennials now, and even not millennials, even, the younger generation, younger than the millennials, are really aware and focused on using more sustainable materials. So I think it's happening. It's the acceleration that I've seen in the last 3-4 years has been mind-boggling compared to where we were 15 years.
And hopefully there'll be more pressure on these brands, because there's a lot of discussion about sustainable and slow fashion, and the apparel industry, I think, is being struck by it. So probably that itself, the push from the other side should do that.
Yes, there is a push from the brands to do it. The problem is, again, you see, I think, one of the challenges that one has to explain in a lot of times. So as I mentioned, we had the technology in 2010. So first of all, just to be clear, it took 6-7 years to develop the technology. And developing meaning, you get it at prototype or you get it in the laboratory scale. And I think what people need to understand is once you have, there's a whole bit of investment to get to the technology development. Once you've got the technology development, it doesn't stop there. You've then got to build, your first big prototype plant. And for something like this, it can take you 8, 9, 10 months to build a prototype plant. And it can then take you maybe another, 1.5, 2, 3 years to get that plant to actually make a quality product. Once you make the quality product, that's still not the end of the game, because you've now then got to drive the cost out of that product and get that product to a cost perspective where the brands and the other customers are willing to buy it. That process itself can take another 2-3 years. Then, at that stage, you still haven't succeeded, because actually you've still only got one plant. So you now have to go back into the market to raise additional capital and additional financing to build more plants. Your typical fundraising processes last anywhere between 6 months to a year, or potentially longer, depending on whether you have COVID or other political issues in the global time frame. And then once you've raised that money, again, it will typically take you anywhere between, let's say, another 12 months to 18 months, because these are big manufacturing plants, to build the next plant. So you have this very complex economy, so to speak, where you're always chasing the tail almost, because you have the technology and then you're trying to convert the brands, and then when the brands finally move there, they suddenly say, oh yeah, we really want this, we want the demand now, but then the demand is still back here because the demand has to catch up in terms of production. And then the brands are starting to push the consumers, and I suppose the consumers will suddenly all of a sudden switch on and go, yes, we really want to make the change, but all of that back stuff hasn't caught up yet, and it takes time. Yeah.
That makes sense. It's tough for sure. So what do you, especially the fact that you've also, like you said, you sit on boards of other companies which are also working on green growth, and even for yourself, so how did you actually stick to keep, continue working in this green business, considering all of these challenges? And all the other new people, like you said, the green economy has space for all, right? I mean, there's a lot of abundance. So all the new enterprises which are really coming in the growth, the green economy, what do you suggest to them? And would you have any advice? And what is the advice that you gave yourself while doing this? So yeah,
it's really, really, really fulfilling. It's just a wonderful way to work. The people you work with, they say birds of a feather flock together, and it's true. Perpetual, honestly, we would never have survived, in my opinion, had we been a traditional business. The investors that we've had supporting this business over the last 10 years have invested money. Yes, they want a return, but they have been true investors, i.e., they're not speculators. They're not people who've jumped on a bandwagon, put money and tried to make money out of it. I would say in the world, there are very few true investors in the world. Most people are speculators. And the wonderful thing about this business and the other businesses I've had is that the investors that we've managed to attract tend to be the investors that have a consciousness, who have an emotional sympathy to doing things correctly, and hence, they have been very patient behind their money. And indeed, people, I think, one of the investors, for example, is Venture East, based in India, who backed us, and they've been, always there, always supportive, really helped the group to get through all the hurdles we had. The other thing is the employees we've had. This company, prior to making it this stage, honestly, we've run out of money 3-4 times in the last 10 years. And, we've had the employees and staff who stayed with us, remained with us. There's been periods when we weren't able to pay salaries, where they didn't leave and they waited patiently. They themselves have struggled through the period, as we developed the company. And now, of course, they're seeing the benefits of it. So this sector is a wonderful sector to go into, because you end up, just working with really great people. And honestly, that makes every day so much more enjoyable. It sounds a bit corny, but it's the truth.
No, I think I mean, at least for Pratham and I can say that we're resonating in it, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to talk about this. I mean, what better time to discuss this than after the pandemic, where this is as real as possible, right in front of our eyes. Yeah, no, so thank you so much for that.
The Economist just wrote a piece a few months ago where they said that this pandemic seems like a preview to the climate emergency. And hopefully, this crisis can trigger us to build better. And, and one of the things we have to do is decarbonize the economy. And, all the things that you said, we to do it at unprecedented scale, and moving to make our economy green is going to require an unprecedented level of capital investments in that direction. And it's nice to see, bankers now talking about ESG-linked funds and central banks mandating climate risks as a way to invest. You've been really the first time I met you almost a decade ago now, Vivek. You've been really an inspirational figure in that area, especially for India, right? You've been a pioneer in green investing. Tell us a little bit about why financing, green financing linked to performance of environment and social impact is crucial for sustainable development. And how do we make more of that?
Yeah. I think again, when you originally used to talk about green investing or sustainable investing, particularly actually in India, but honestly, globally, it was always renewable energy.
Right.
Yeah.
and this everybody used to talk about being sustainable investors or green investors, but actually when you dug down, a vast amount, I don't know what percentage, but I'm pretty sure it was above 85% went into renewable energy. And
Right.
and very little money found its way into anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Then I would say there was a slow shift away from renewable energy towards what I would then call an even more dangerous sector, which really was involved in greenwashing. So there were large amounts of investment that went into what I would call very much traditional businesses, but they got a little slant to make them appear environmental or green because maybe it was the same product, but it used a solar pack on it or something, and that made it green, which wasn't the case. Or people would invest in software companies doing something on logistics because it made the logistics more efficient, and hence that made it green. And there's a period of that as well, which was, in my opinion, the worst period actually that arose. Again, as you correctly said, Pratima, this has not changed again. Now I do feel you do have a sense more, as you said, of ESG. People are interested in what's called LCA reports or life cycle reports. There is a genuine interest now that is being pushed by companies who, in their annual reports, want to be able to say and need to be able to say, we are doing these things to reduce our carbon emission. Governments are implementing in certain countries rules. So, for example, again, I won't mention the brand in this particular instance, but there's a big brand that, for example, wants to build many new shops and manufacturing facilities in a certain country. And they have been mandated by the government that they can do that so long as they only generate X amount of CO2. So if they wanted to do 50 plants, they probably wouldn't be able to unless they changed the way they work significantly.
Mm-hmm.
So back to the financing, I think it is opening up a lot more now. Hopefully also with interest rates around the world going very low, money will start to also hopefully chase 4-5% returns rather than the much higher returns they're looking for. This will give an ability for companies like ourselves to raise debt at a cheaper level, hopefully, and put more back into the economy, more back into the people, help maybe push the price of buying plastic bottles. My dream would be able to maintain the same company we have, but be able to pay $700 per ton of plastic bottles rather than $400. I think it is happening. I definitely see the changes in the last 4 or 5 years. Again, positive direction.
Yeah.
And has the world of green finance grown in general? Is there capital? Is that whole kind of pie of green and impact-based financing grown as well?
Yeah. Again, so as a group ourselves, traditionally we've raised predominantly from high net worth family money, and traditionally I've done that again because we're investing in a sector where the technology necessarily wasn't at the time proven, and we knew it was a long cycle, and we needed more patient capital. So that's more an area that we focused. However, as technology is now maturing, not just ours, but many other competitors, there is now room for those, what I would call more traditional financiers to come in. And there is a lot more green bonds, green private equity groups, and also, just the generally big traditional private equity groups who have now got sections which are focused on environment and sustainability, who are raising funds that are exclusively sustainable based. So there's definitely much, much wider. And also, actually, to be honest with you, you don't have to go to a traditional green fund or green private equity group anymore. You can go, you don't have to go to a fund that is labeled as green or environmental. You can go to a traditional fund and they look at you because, as you said earlier on, Nidhi, it makes profit now as well. The margins are there, the profit's there. You can prove to them that demand is there, the supply is there. So it's no longer, you don't have to start the presentation by talking about the environmental side necessarily. You start the presentation by talking about this is a great business.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's so true. And, so and I'll connect you later to that. So I work on the blue economy work in India with World Bank. And we've been trying to create these blue bonds and the green bonds. And like you rightly said, banks are not going to just be interested in giving any amount of money, even if the government is subsidizing it, to a business which will fail. So no failing business is going to get any financing. And the fact is that these businesses actually work. And that's really the pitch that needs to come in. And Vivek, just taking it further. So like I know in India, and want to know your experience, there are many challenges which still happen in promotion of these green and blue businesses also in the, in the economy. And from the government side, there are challenges of the fact that, there are no certifications, there are no standards, the traceability is very poor. What, according to you, as a business side also, there are challenges. You do have a plant in Nasik here in India. At the policy level, what do you think that the government or the policy environment can do to make it better for these businesses of your kinds to come forth in our country or anywhere else?
There's a lot of questions in there. I'll try to address some of them. So with regards to certification, specifically for Perpetual, we're quite lucky. There is very well-known certification standards that are required that the company meets that are followed on a global level. So something that's called GR certification, which we adhere to and we do. And that's definitely helped us a lot because it allows us to provide an even platform for the brands to be able to look at across the board when they buy products. So yeah, we've been very, very fortunate that in the sector we're in, that's very well organized already. I don't know about other sectors necessarily, but yes, I can say, for example, for the waste electronic industry, there isn't, to the best of my knowledge, a certification. And actually, I think I'm going to take a note because I think that's actually a good idea. I might talk to some people about that later. But yeah, creating a standard certification platform is good. With regards to the government, I have always been very careful throughout my last 30 years of working not to get involved in businesses that only survive on the basis of government subsidies. So none of the companies that I have been involved in have survived on government subsidies. They might thrive or do better because of government subsidies, but they mustn't survive on it, if that kind of makes sense. Where governments do help a lot, in my opinion, is in two areas. I mentioned to you that it takes 10, 15 years to make an investment. And where it helps is where governments provide really strong clarity and then don't change for a period of 10, 20 years. For example, I'll give you a good example. China will say, we're going to deploy, 10 gigawatts of wind power by 2025. And we're going to do another 10 gigawatts by 2029 or 2030. And it'll give a roadmap of what its plans are, and it'll stick to it. And so an entrepreneur or businessman can look at that and they can decide, okay, we're going to make 2 to 3 years of investments where we might make a loss, might take a loss, but those 2 to 3 years investments are important because in the next 7 to 10 years, we'll make all of our gains and profits. Converse that with other countries, the UK being a good example, where we flip in and out of taking decisions. So, one government will come in and say, we're going to do 1 gigawatt of wind power plants offshore. And then, 2 years later, they change their mind and it's gone. So, when they make a statement, nobody's really sure if they should do it or they shouldn't do it. So, if the government in India were to come out and say, for example, we have a problem of plastic in India. This is a real problem that we should fix. We can fix it internally because we have the technology and the know-how how to do it. We have the staff, we have the people. So we are going to decree that by 2030, 10% of all material made in India should be made from recycled. That provides a really strong statement and a really strong stimulus where it allows the entrepreneurs to work and people to find solutions. So that's one. The other area I think that needs to be understood is, again, in any industry, when you are coming into it with a new technology to do a green growth economy and to do something different, you're starting something from new. So if I look, for example, at traditional polyester manufacturing companies in India, a typical polyester manufacturing company, which is being developed, might be processing, the smallest processing plant might be about 200,000 tons a year, and the average might be about 400,000 tons a year. And that's because it's had 30 years to build itself up, to get the processes down, to increase its scale. So it's quite hard for a company like Perpetual, which is producing 10,000 tons in a first prototype, to compete with another company that's producing 300,000 to 400,000 tons with big scale.
Yeah.
And here, there does need to, so it's not like we're playing on a level field anyway. The field is not level to start with. So any ability to help level that field, for example, on taxes, there should be a benefit to us when we export sustainable yarns. There should be a benefit to those companies in India who are brands who are using sustainable yarns and sustainable products. And those benefits can come in many ways. It can come in either reduction of taxation, or it could come in help with the employment, or it could come in training, or, I can make a list for you. But evening the level playing field is definitely an area where more help would be much appreciated.
No, I think that's very important, and I think the government, as of now, is thinking about aspects like eco-labeling and how would that help in exports, for supporting these kind of businesses. But it takes time in our country, like we all know. But there's definitely a thought. There's definitely a thought about those things, even in industries linked to plastic. I can tell you that. So that's a very good two advice that you've given us. I think that's very helpful.
But this was such a fascinating conversation, Vivek. And thank you for spending this hour with us and taking us through this journey. It's so inspiring to hear what you've done. And and I can't wait to meet you in person after this nightmare of a pandemic is over. Yeah.
It's been a long time. It's been a long time.
Yes.
I will steal your line. Doing more and better with less, and you can steal mine on Minds Above Ground.
Thank you, Vivek. Stay in touch, and thanks everyone for joining us, and stay tuned for more programming on our social media on sustainable and inclusive development. Thank you.
Thanks so much. See you. Bye.